Asus ROG Strix Z690-E Gaming Wi-Fi Review. The most distinct and rarely seen feature is the built-in PCIe 5.0x4 M.2 socket. Though Asus altered the look to some extent, it still has the same luxurious ROG Strix feel to it. What this board does not possess anymore is a price below £400, which previously placed it in our best motherboards list. If this board cost a bit less, chances are it would still make its way there easily enough. The Z690E gaming Wi-Fi lagged slightly behind the average throughout the course of our benchmarking series. The board closely followed Intel standards and posted slight reductions in performance when compared to other DDR4 boards. General gaming performance was conventional all around, though AIDA 64 memory bandwidth scores were on the higher side. In totality, there were minimal ultimate variations between them all. Unless you were consistently running benchmarks, it would be difficult to tell any distinction between them. The Strix Z690E Gaming includes all the basics you need to get started, plus the ROG Hyper M.2 card for additional M.2 storage. Under a comprehensive inspection, the board has a monochrome color scheme with some logos featured on the I/O shield and heatsink for the chipset. The only source of RGB is situated above the I/O area, where Asus logo serves as an awesome centerpiece to be regulated using Aura Sync. Both VRM heatsinks are sizable, and unwieldy and seem able to fulfill their task of cooling off the current beneath them perfectly. The chipset heatsink features further branding details such as Strix in white with ROG also in white, as well as Asus headquarters latitude and longitude coordinates. Over the M.2 socket stands a heatsink attached to another smaller heatsink by way of a heat pipe. Our gaze is on the top half of the board, so we'll begin with the VRM heatsink. These are coupled using a heat pipe to split up the heat. The left VRM heatsink is extensive, going beyond the I/O cover, and even has an included RGB element. There may not be that much surface area, but there's plenty of weight. As you'll observe in a moment, the heatsinks had no trouble maintaining the VRMs at acceptable levels. The top of the VRM heatsinks has two reinforced 8-pin EPS connectors to give power to the CPU. The socket is filled with a lot of black capacitors and other components near the CPU, including two 4-pin fan headers. To the right of the socket are 4 RAM slots allowing for up to 128 GB of RAM, with Asus listing RAM speeds up to 6400 MHz, but this may not be achievable with all components. Memory kits, a processor memory controller, and a quality motherboard are all required in order to reach these speeds. Right above the VRM heatsinks and RAM slot are two 4-pin fan connectors, out of a total of 8. Directly over the top, M.2 sockets are 2 more, and there is another couple by the SATA slots. Every header has a 1A 12 watts power output, which is really not quite enough for higher grade boards. At least one should have the greater capability. The Q fan feature will be used for all fan pump headers except the AIO_ pump that runs on maximum speed as default. In the upper right corner, we see 2 RGB headers with a 3-pin ARGB on the left and a 4-pin RGB on the right. All RGBs coupled to the board are governed by the Asus Aura Sync software to adjust their light effects. Going along the right border, we first encounter the QLED display and Q-code LED. The former consists of 4 LEDs, which illuminate during post-operations. When a problem emerges that stops booting up to an OS, the corresponding LED at which the difficulty exists will remain alight. The Q-code LED supplies finer details about where precisely that issue might be situated. Heading down the right side, we can find the ATX 24-pin PSU connector that supplies power to the board, a USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 front panel connector, and a USB 3.2 Gen 1 port. If the processor's internal video is being used, one can select between DisplayPort and HDMI port. Other sorts of connectivity are included, including the 2.5 GB port, Wi-Fi 6E antenna links, and a 5 plug plus DIF audio package.